There you go.
Try again.
Okay. Right, we'll start again. So that's not an auspicious start. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee. We've got Councillor Martin Cahn, who is the, what's the proper name for it? Rapporteur for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that, you know, so that he can report back, I suppose, what's going on. So, welcome, Martin. You're always welcome. Okay, we'll start off with apologies for absence. So I think from Tim Jones and Emma Garfield, who are the business board representatives. I'm not aware that we have any public speakers, unless anybody tells me to the contrary. Okay. Oh, right. Yes, the mayor is on a call, I think, with the minister at the moment, and will be joining us. Actually, can I just check? Are we for it to continue?
Yes, we are, Chair. Yeah, we're fine.
All right. Thank you. Right. So coming to number 3. So, Councillor Cahn, it says that we haven't received any questions from you. You're just happy to be here to observe. And okay, that's lovely. Thank you. So yes. So quorum is 4. Only members of the committee will be entitled to vote at meetings, not co-opted meetings, and I don't have a casting vote, so that's fine. Any matters to be decided by the committee are to be decided by consensus. Yes. And do any members here have any disclosable pecuniary interests in relation to today's agenda, please? No, thank you very much. If anything occurs to you during the meeting, then please just let us know, and we'll make sure that those are dealt with. Okay, so we've got minutes. Yes, minutes of the last meeting. Are there any issues arising from those minutes, please? Thank you. They're very detailed. An amendment. Okay, yes, I think I saw that online. So that's all been dealt with. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Davenport. Are all members happy with the minutes? Happy that I sign them as a correct record? Thank you very much indeed. So those are approved. And yes, we've got no public questions, which is unusual actually. And forward, so item 5 is forward plan. So note the combined authorities forward plan for February. Any issues arising from this, please? No? Okay, this is all boding well so far. So item number 6. So Pamela Abbott, who is the Director of Natural Cambridgeshire, and you've come in person, which is really nice, Pamela. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, may I raise a point of order?
Right, yes. Please take a seat while I speak to.
Can I just ask our member from Fenland if everything is in order for him to join the committee today?
Fine. Do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. So I've received no notice of the notice that comes after the committee, I think, that's been referred to. So at the moment, nothing has changed. I phoned my leader this morning and asked him what he would like me to do, and he said I remain our representative on this committee. Thank you.
I'm slightly mystified, but I'm told the monitoring officer is happy with it. So if the monitoring officer's advice is that that's fine, then that's fine. So excuse me for my mystification here. Right. So Pamela, it's really kind of you to come in person and to tell us about everything that Natural Cambridgeshire has been doing. Back in the day, I was able to attend meetings which were just fascinating, and I was terribly impressed with you know, the number of organisations that were represented and the calibre of the people and the passion of the people there. And I'm really sorry that my diary doesn't allow me to take part anymore, but I'm really pleased that you're here just to bring us all up to speed on the work you've been doing. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me. Oh, thank you very much for having me. So I plan to just give a brief update on our activities throughout the year. I want to say this at the beginning and I'll say this at the end, hugely grateful for the support of the Combined Authority, not just in terms of our capacity for support in terms of funding, but actually support from all the constituent local authorities in terms of our contributing towards our activities, and us being able to sort of champion and celebrate the activities that are happening across the Combined Authority area. So I just wanted to get that in the beginning. We all know the context of the pressures on land, the pressures on people, and we understand that at the moment the local authority landscape is moving very quickly, and in terms of national infrastructure, all of these things are moving very quickly. So I think it feels even more important that we have a local nature partnership that centres all of the activity and sort of catalyses and enables collaboration across all of the nature related activities. So just moving on, I'm hopeful that Chris will just notice that I'm moving on, and that will all be well. So every year we do two reports. One is our standard annual report, and another one celebrates all of the activities that are happening across all of the areas. So all of the local authorities, all of the statutory organisations, and all of the environmental NGOs. So part of our role is to ensure that all of these activities that are happening for nature are communicated and understood. And some of the additional funding, which we're very grateful to be receiving, better, and some of the capacity funding is going to enable us to have an I hope you've all received this report. It goes into much more detail, and now I'm just going to tell you some of the main work areas that we've been involved in ourselves. A major one for me, which is probably occupying, I put my hand up very early to say, oh yes, I'd like to co-chair the local nature recovery strategy steering group. Little did I kind of realise that that would be sort of 80% and sometimes 110% of my time. And I'm very grateful to both Judith and Adrian and Anna, who latterly has come on board with this. It's been a mammoth undertaking, but it feels like the utterly right vehicle for a local nature partnership to be focusing our effort on, because this is bringing together everything that everybody in the districts wants to do for nature, and then putting it into a strategy, which will then go into an implementation plan. And we just, we've had a kind of a relatively rocky road. There are some really quite disparate areas, some quite disparate ambitions, and our role in the local nature partnership is to kind of hold all of those and to leverage our experts and our organisations to try and articulate what we really want. And this is our vision. I wrote the vision. It's creating a wildlife rich, resilient, productive and sustainable landscape. So it really speaks to our agricultural heritage. I was at the Fenland Soil conference yesterday, that the huge impact and importance of agriculture and agriculture related employment, but also the huge opportunities for nature if that land is managed in a way which supports more nature and also enables us to sequester and store carbon as a result of that. So some of the new techniques with re-wetting, and our role is then to sort of work alongside to see how can we enable biodiversity to happen along that. So the fen droves, the kind of veteran trees that are there, and the ditch network, and making sure that those kind of fenland things that are important with Fenland market towns and Fenland areas form part of our local nature recovery strategy, as well as all of the very standard, we've come up with the doubling nature, everyone's adopted it. We've also, we understand that the John Clare countryside is beautiful and the ooze and all those kind of things, but actually there is beauty across all of our land, and it's really, really important, all of our habitats and all of our species. And so is all kind of incorporated in that. And another really important part of that is the wider benefits of our functioning ecosystems. So it's horrible big nature speak words, but when nature works well for us, it works well for people. Last night I was kind of looking again at some of the research into nature, well-being, and those kind of health benefits. And Tony Juniper quite recently presented at a conference I was at, and he was emphasising how those nature-based solutions are not just around flooding and all of that kind of thing. They're actually around urban urban trees and urban well-being. And he told a story of how his neighbor very excitedly came up to him and said, they've rewilded our park. And he was quite mystified because he knows the local park. And it turned out they'd let an area of grass grow a bit longer. And so actually, you know, it doesn't have to be, it could be Wood Walton Fen becoming the Great Fen, but it could be just letting a little bit of scrappy nature be a bit more scrappy near where everybody lives. And I think it's that investment. And we want to be the catalysts and conveners of all of these local initiatives, which all of the districts have their own schemes, which is wonderful. The county has its own scheme. And so sort of us being that convener and joiner of people is a really important part of this. We have been responsible for the stakeholder engagement and communication element of the local nature recovery strategy, which kicked off early last year with some expert workshops. The drive from DEFRA is do not just get a load of, I'm really difficult how to characterize, a load of your typical people who are nature conservationists, let's say. Don't just get them in a room and they tell us exactly what they've been telling us for the last 20 years. We really want to hear from the people what they actually value and what they want. And so our role in Natural Cambridgeshire has been going out to the people. So for those who can't come to things, we've had a survey, we had nearly 1,500 responses. We've had 40 organisations contribute to what they see. We've gone out, you know, it's been faith organisations, youth organisations, all of those organisations across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, as well as going to particular events where people are at anyway, in libraries. We've been into Ely Library, we've had a big Imaginarium in Cambridge that we were part of, and also, you know, in Neem Park. So we've tried to be present in all areas so that we can listen to all voices. And part of that is the really important constituent community of farmers and landowners. So we've had 11 events for farmers and landowners across the whole of the county. Some have been open to all, and some where we've actually been to clusters that are existing. And one of the bids that I'm going to make later on is actually for how the combined authority could potentially support that outreach beyond the current capacity of those people who are working with farmers and landowners. And we will be at the forefront of helping design the communication and engagement phase when we come to the public consultation for this. And the planning, I'm going to a planning meeting tomorrow about that, where we are starting to plan for the public consultation, which will be in the summer, all being well. The next thing I want to talk about is our fund, which was one of our kind of initial things. You gave us £1 million. We went, fabulous. And part of that is for funding for communities. And this is just a picture. Sorry, this is now a picture of the Wisbech. Oh, you can't see it. Okay, that doesn't help. Sorry. This is a picture of the Wisbech Street Pride people. They are one of 36 groups which applied for funding in our community fund. We had a 90,000 to give out to different community schemes. We had 2 tranches open last year. We had 36 applications, and of those 31 were approved, and the others were really just not according to the criteria. I've got you a stats slide. I thought we'll have a nice slide with actual people, and then there's like but there's a sort of a representation of where there's roughly an equal split. Don't worry, it's not really, it's more to kind of like go, goodness, there's a lot, rather than exactly as that. But there's a real mix. It's almost equal mix of urban and rural. It's almost a kind of equal mix of different types of organisations coming for it. It's also very spread across the districts. So in the second tranche, we had fewer from those districts which had recently launched their own community grants. So and huge enthusiasm for that. We are now starting to give out the funding for that. And then the other sort of major part was the sort of 850,000 of that million for Landscape Scale Fund. We have suffered a bit from some of the delays. We've also suffered from our own, we want to make this innovative. Everybody gives out grants. So could we give out loans? Could this be a different way? Could we ask people to actually make money from nature and actually pay that? So it's a revolving fund. So you just don't give us the money. Say, thank you very much. We've given out that money. Could you give us some more money to give out? We want to see if all of these new ways of financing nature could bring back money to us whilst at the same time restoring nature and connecting with people and landscapes. Some of the delays did lead to a dropout, which was unfortunate. We lost one of our applicants because they managed to secure other funding in that time. But we have gone ahead with the Fleam Dyke. This is a picture of Fleam Dyke, where the Wildlife Trust are creating a habitat bank. And so some of the green financing, if you give them a grant and they put up a fence around it in order to graze it and get biodiversity net gain, they can't get biodiversity net gain because you have funded that fence. Whereas if you give them a loan for that fence, they can then say this land is available, and then they can repay the fence, and then they can also have that biodiversity net gain money for. It's a real emerging market. So is all of those other financing. So we're aiming to be that bridge. I think some of the uncertainty in farming, we are launching the second tranche of our fund on the 4th of February. So next week, we've got a webinar for farmers on the 11th of February where Martin Lyons, one of our local farmers, is speaking. I think it's a bit uncertain because the farming landscape is really uncertain at the moment. So it will be really interesting, and we may need to have a rethink. And if we need to have a rethink in that perhaps for now, grants may be more of a way, or there may be other ways, then I think we'll come back and have a conversation with you. But we are really committed to this driving innovation and trying to make it a revolving fund. Another thing that we've done with the fund is we've become University of Cambridge evidence champions, because this fund, it asks for how are you going to look across at what's already happening and not just reinvent the wheel. How are you going to you've done and share it with others? And that is a criteria. Apply for the fund, you have to say how you're doing that. So we've now been published, the fund has been published in the British Ecological Society Journal as kind of championing evidence very, very recently. As part of this, how am I doing for time? Am I all right? Yeah. Okay. As part of this, we've been listening to farmers and landowners about where are the hurdles, where are the difficulties. And there's kind of three main difficulties that we've identified, that we've put a proposal to the Combined Authority, that some of that funding, I think, which was initially allocated in a sort of rewilding fund, might be a sustainable land use fund over 2 years to support those facilitators and organizations and individuals who are already working with farm clusters, to see if they can reach out, give them, capacity to reach out within their areas, to bring in more members, to have that sharing of learning, to reach out beyond their areas, but to potentially start in new areas. So we're not kind of going, clear the space, everybody, we can do this. We're saying, let us convene and catalyze and champion and see if we can help you in this area, reach out in those clusters. Another hurdle that we've had, and when I was in Norfolk Wildlife Trust, we actually had to apply for Wendling Beck. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a kind of big sort of green finance innovative project, because at that time the farmers in that grouping had not got themselves in a legal sort of way that they could apply for it. And often one of the hurdles is that farmers want to collaborate, but they can't actually apply for the funding together. They haven't got themselves in a way to receive funding. So we want to enable that peer-to-peer consultancy, potentially from farmers who've already done it. So potentially from that Wendling Beck exemplar, but open to where else it might be. And the other kind of element is we really don't understand how we can maximize that. There's kind of sharks in the biodiversity net gain waters, and how can we be that, where can we trust that we can independently say, we have land, that we could have a conversation with developers about having nature on our land. Where could there be that kind of independent repository of land? And so we're now working with the Wildlife Trust to create a BNG list of sites where we will then apply Natural Cambridgeshire's criteria and those that come from the local nature recovery strategy. So is it near a priority landscape? Is it potentially buffering? Is it potentially linking important habitats? Is it of real importance around towns and cities where it could enable that access to nature? So kind of putting on our criteria so that those developers that really want to can go to that and look at it and go, I'm getting real value for this, for nature. So that's three of the things that we're kind of proposing that we may be able to do if you chose this sustainable land use fund. Another thing that we have done, which is more of a looking in at ourselves and then thinking, how best can we meet the future? And we've kind of come up with sort of 4 areas of our work that we really want to do more in. And it's around convening, listening, championing, and then driving nature recovery. So we've got a new business plan that starts on the 1st of April. We've got this additional capacity. We also want to create a baseline for the state of nature. We don't really know. We think there's around 8% of land managed for nature. We really want to delve in as much as we can to say, this is what we have now. So that when we all say we're doubling nature, we can have our best estimate of where and when we are doubling nature. So that impact that's happening across all of the agents and actors for nature recovery, be that private individuals or, you know, authority areas or statutories or nature NGOs, where is that nature recovery? You know, where is that nature ambition happening? And can we then lay a new baseline and update that? And finally, in our connecting, this is a kind of hot off the press, we are restoring lost species. So the large marsh grasshopper this summer is returning to Cambridgeshire from it's been extinct for 50 years. There's a successful project in Norfolk, which has restored 6,500 individuals. And this project is special because it isn't just a nature conservation organization saying, here's our secret plan. We're going to put it on our lovely nature reserve. Thank you very much, members of the public. Just don't walk your dogs near here. It's actually, we give a Petri dish of eggs to people and a cage, special training and oversight. They rear these grasshoppers in their homes. And so that will be coming to Cambridgeshire, and then they release them on their local site. And it doesn't just get their families involved, it gets their communities involved. It's just a really special connecting nature and people that anyone can do and that we help people do. Because I think it's so important to make the ordinary extraordinary. And my final slide is thanking you for your support over this time and advocating for you continuing this support for a further 3 years in your medium-term financial plan.
Much. So that's a kind of quite impressive for 2 part-time people, soon to be 3 part-time people. I'm going to ask for questions. I just want a point of some clarification on a couple of things. Did I hear right that you'd been giving loans rather than grants?
Yes.
Okay.
So the community fund is all grants.
Yeah.
And what we had committed to is a kind of 2-to-1 ratio of, so you provide the funding and then at least double that in either volunteer funding or funding from elsewhere, it comes back. But it is a grant.
Okay.
For capital items for nature. The main landscape scale fund for now is in loans, but it doesn't have to be a loan. It could be an innovative way of saying, we want to build this and we will get a return over this amount of time. So we are very open to negotiation around what it might be that provides a revolving fund.
Right. Quite like a conversation about that, please, because I just know that, you know, the financial regulations are quite tricky on loans. I know the Combined Authority has given housing loans in the past, but I'd just kind of like to take that offline and just have a conversation about that, please. I'm not objecting. I just need I just need to be sure that, you know, this is all fine.
I just wondered about just clarifying that it is Natural Cambridgeshire. You have given us a grant,
Okay.
and Natural Cambridgeshire is making the loan agreement.
Yeah. Yes.
If that helps, I'm sure
Well,
Adrian has been
yes.
right at the centre of this, so he will help you.
Yeah, I know, but I just know I mean, I just know from suggesting doing it myself with my own organisation, actually, the financial regulations make it really hard. Do you want to come in, Adrian?
Yeah, so this was part of our initial business case on this grant, this funding they went through, and it was about testing new ways in which to drive investment into nature. And the loans position has had legal advice through it. So it's about entering into agreements with landowners, and so it's slightly different from the sort of financial services regulations side of things, but it was all of that.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And then I'll come in with a couple of things while I wait for other people to ask some questions. I'm interested to know, well, when you were talking earlier about all the sort of stakeholder engagement, I'm interested to know what involvement public health have had with you, because we are all acutely aware of the benefits of nature to well-being and health, and particularly, you know, since COVID has not faded from our memories. So I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in whether you have had any engagement with East West Rail and whatever the organisation is now, whatever it's called, that's building the A428, keeps changing its name, whether you've had any engagement, what's it called now? National Highways, it's called now, okay. Whether you've had any engagement with them during your own processes. Thank you.
Yes, so I think health is quite a tricky one to break into. We certainly have had conversations with, say, the Addenbrooks around their estate in relation to local nature recovery strategy. And in the early days when the Future Parks was potentially going to align with some of the funding for health, we had those conversations. That seemed to sort of go away at that point. And certainly we've acknowledged in our business plan that actually a direct, you know, we have focused on the kind of things that we can do. But I do think enabling those future conversations, I know I've put it back in the business plan again, it is an area we need to do more on. And certainly my colleague Helen has conversations with health partners at Hitchingbrook and Peterborough and that. So we have those dialogues, but I think thinking strategically, how could we do that best, is a really important part of the implementation plan for the local nature recovery strategy, which I think will follow it.
Yes, and of course, we all have people within our own organisations who are involved in public health and so on as well. So tapping into them. Mayor, you want to respond on that?
Yeah, it's just on the point, you know, when you ask us, you know, sort of, you know, we could be involved in that as, you know, as constituent authorities, or knowing if you're struggling to get engagement with, you know, institutions, the actual overarching thing is the integrated care partnership. And I, you know, I think arguably missing a trick. I mean, you know, we to some extent, the money is handed over to your organisation to deliver. And thank you for the presentation. My apologies, we're a bit late. Can I just ask have we been sent that talk as well?
I'm sure we will. You will share it with us.
Because I just, you know, there's a lot of information there, and I was trying to kind of take on board how far we've gone, having had the opportunity to. I know, is it Flame Dyke? Yeah, no, I once had heard about that. I took myself over there and enjoyed the walk there, and could see the work that's being done. But I think there is something here that it's a bit frustrating to hear that you may have gone off, and obviously to some extent that's what we asked you to do. But you know, you're coming back here now, and I just think there could have been more maybe conversations directly either with chair or indeed officers, unless you want to say something. But you know, why don't you use the power of the voice of the elected representatives to kind of knock down some of those doors if you struggle?
And they are impenetrable, these doors at times, but I think you're quite right. The Integrated Care Board is the way in. Judith, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I'm very happy to follow up on this conversation and to work with you to connect you in with key people on the public health side, who I think will be particularly interested in how we can work together on that agenda.
Right. Yes, please.
But you know, why stop there? You know, prisons estate. You know, why not? You know, look at the police and crime commissioner is on the combined authority. Fire and these are all public bodies that, you know, we're kind of in some ways in terms of local government have involvement in, but, you know, why not rewild around care homes, you know, these sorts of things.
Yes.
You may or may not have thought about actually understand that, but, you know, our actual organisation sometimes would be another way to approach it.
Yes, and churches are often very good about doing it. We've got lots of, but I mean, for me, it's about getting past it just being about people's estates. It's about embedding this in their policies, so people are thinking, you know, that it's not just about making sure they've planted trees and they've got some wildflowers. It's, you know, it feeds into, you know, really every aspect of their organisations. And then last point for me, love some grasshoppers. Please, can I have a cage of grasshoppers to raise? I'd really enjoy that. Thank you. Any questions from anybody else? Perhaps any more grasshopper parents? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you, Pam, for your presentation. I wanted to ask you a finance question. You told us a few updates on capital projects. In the current financial year, this committee approved £50,000 operational revenue for Natural Cambridgeshire. And then there's a proposal in the MTFS for that to increase over the future years. Can you tell us a bit about what that has been spent on in your organisation?
We haven't actually received the 50K yet. And as many will know, we're often quite late in receiving our capacity funding. So we've been relatively cautious about this because Neem Park have had to kind of tide us over. Otherwise, we would have been operating. I don't know if it's okay to surface this. We would have been operating without funds. But so we have set out a kind of ambitious list of things that we want to do with that funding. Partly it's around making our communications more strategic. You know, we've got a terrible website currently. We really want to kind of nail having those conversations with all of you. The health thing is really just about capacity. It might be about doors, but it is about where do we focus our time. So having that extra 0.8 of a person as an executive officer whose job is to make sure we can go out and kind of knock properly on all of those doors. We really want to have one-to-ones with all of the council leaders, with the council officers to so we have an ambitious programme of listening and continuing to convene to do a better newsletter showcasing all of our work, all of your work and all of the work of the organisations, to have better conversations with members of the public. But also this State of Nature report is very much part of that additional funding. And so far we have allocated, should the Sustainable Land Use Fund not come through, we've allocated 12K towards doing this biodiversity net gain list of sites. So we've kind of put that in there, but if the funding comes through from sustainable land use, then we would want to use that for that, and then catalyse more work with the farmers and landowners. So we have put a specific programme of work that will utilise that work. That will probably, maybe the end of this year, we will spend some of it, and then into next year.
Thank you. Adrian, could you just respond to the money issue, please?
Yeah, just to sort of clarify where we are. So we have approved the additional funding for Natural Cambridgeshire, and it's taken us till recently going through the new SAF process, and also because of priorities around the local nature recovery strategy. Hence, Natural Cambridgeshire couldn't do a lot of advanced planning for this financial year, but we have now got to the position where we've agreed the funding, and we have regular engagement around the business plan. So the additional 50,000 is just then subject to the process of claiming this year. We've already agreed the process forward. The sustainable land use, you may recall, was an initial allocation specifically by the board around rewilding. We held it back because feedback that we got was that wasn't a priority when we went out to the farming community as to how that can be delivered. And then we've also been looking at how that can align to the work that we're doing on the local nature recovery strategy. So that's why, again, we haven't brought back to this committee the business case update on that, but it is something that we're now in discussions with Natural Cambridgeshire about how we can best deploy that bit of funding. So that will come back for a decision. But the actual core funding is now agreed.
Okay. Councillor Davenport-Ray, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Pam. That's really interesting because at my constituent council, we have felt some delays in funding reaching some of our programs as well. So I'd probably like to hear a little bit more about that, maybe outside the meeting, how that process works. But I had another question about the B&G list for sites that you mentioned. What advantages are there to creating that list at your level, at the regional level, rather than at each planning authority level, in whatever shape or size our planning authorities end up at in the next few years?
So I think many of our priority landscapes cross district borders and some of them cross county borders as well. So I think, so our model is based on Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, created one of these lists of sites that has had a spatial element. So I think people being able to see where they could have off-site biodiversity net gain, though obviously encouraging on-site because that is nature near where people live. So this isn't saying, yes, that's better. This is saying, if you want to do that, here are some really good places to do that. And I think some of that will be creating new sites next to existing sites. So you get that crossover of nature, but you also get people able to access sites which are not necessarily as sensitive. And I think seeing that spatially across the whole of the combined authority area will be really important. And, you know, Peterborough said, we just don't want all of our money going to John Clare Countryside. It's kind of nice enough already. And so I think actually spatially being able to see where it goes will be really helpful for developers and really helpful for local authorities. May I answer the East West Rail question that you asked? So we are, East West Rail have started a biodiversity grouping, and we, and as Natural Cambridgeshire, are part of that. And also our Peter Lansoff, one of our trustees, who's very well connected. He actually knows the chief exec, of course, or chair, and so he is having kind of regular conversations at that level as well. So we are connected at connections. Very, very keen that nature is part of that conversation. We heard the announcements around East West Rail and the Cambridge. So I think it will become even more critical. And I think the implementation plan for the local nature recovery strategy is going to be so critical with all of these changes that are happening at the same time.
Thank you very much. With regard to the BNG mapping and so on, you have factored in the work that was done by the Pan Regional Partnership on the Oxford-Cambridge. They've got a massive database where DEFRA's done a huge amount of opportunity mapping work. So just, you know, make sure, I'm sure you are tapped into it, but just in case, you know, don't reinvent the wheel, because there might be a load of really, really good stuff already there that DEFRA's produced. Okay.
Definitely. And also the local nature recovery strategy work built on the Future Parks work, which built on other work that, and we incorporated all the work that districts have done with the Wildlife Trust as well. So all of these spatial plans that we know about, and I will double check on that one, but I'm pretty certain.
It's really sophisticated, and Nathan Veer has, has put together, extraordinary database there, which is free access for everybody. And in fact, you know, we're having discussions about if and when the Pan Regional Partnership goes, where that actually sits. I've got Councillor Day online, and then I've got the Mayor. No, Councillor Tilly.
So I think it's on many different, I don't know where to face here. I think the benefits are on many different levels. There are some sort of tangible financial rewards in improving people's health, and so that improves their well-being, and so that improves their ability to work and contribute to the local economy. So I think there's that kind of level. There is also the benefits to crops of having nature in crops, the benefits of pollinators, you know, the benefits of having agriculture that suits the land, so that you are having nature-friendly farming like we have in the nature-friendly farming group, like all the work that's being done in Fenland Soil. This is about kind of continuing to have an economic gain from the land that doesn't diminish because the peat is disappearing, because you are potentially running it into unsustainable methods. So it's about sustainable livelihoods from the farms at the same time as sustainable nature. And we were hearing at the Fenland Soil Conference yesterday about all sorts of innovation in relation to that. There are also the financial gains from landscape recovery at landscape scale funding that is coming from DEFRA. There's also environmental land management and sustainable finance initiatives. So there is various money that comes to landowners if they do things for nature. So I was thinking of kind of finance on all of those different levels, sort of tangible and some less tangible and measurable.
Thank you very much. That's lovely. I think it was Councillor Tierney next, then the Mayor, then Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Your enthusiasm is obvious, and that's very refreshing, so thanks for that. I was interested in what you were saying about trying to reach different groups of people for the input, and I think that's laudable, but also very difficult, because by its nature, the people who approach you, even in less usual settings, will be people with an interest. So I was wondering how you were going to reach even further into the kind of public that might not engage in future. Do you have any plans for that?
Very easy to go to Cambridge and King's College and 2,000 people walk past you who are very beautifully engaged, and they do lovely drawings and lovely art. So part of our outreach has been with library services, because the library service newsletter for the county, not for Peterborough, that's kind of slightly more tricky, and we've used Neem Park for that, which I understand is more niche in that people don't necessarily go to Neem Park. But we've kind of tried to reach people through the ways in which they are already engaging in their communities. So those groups that are already working. So not us kind of going, oh, we're going to work with care leavers, but actually who is working existingly with people who are leaving care, and who could we do that? I think we haven't ramped up to that next level yet with our additional capacity. And when we start to do the implementation plan for local nature recovery strategy, I think all of your input into who are those hard to reach people? How could we best reach them? And kind of that's part of the conversation that I would like us to have with all of you quite soon. Who do you think are those hard to reach people? Because we won't necessarily, we're nature people. We won't necessarily know that. You are dealing with your communities. So, and organisations in your areas are doing that. So we've tried to do that with our nature grants, with actually saying, to people who are already in that space, what do you want to do? And some, like the National Trust in Wisbech, really wanted to reach out with their Peckover House volunteers to reach a wider group of people. So that's definitely, I think, in the space between both of our expertises, and we would love to have a conversation about that.
To invite you to come to the Wisbech Rock Festival and have a stall there, because it's in Wisbech Park, lovely setting, and you would get to meet the entire scope of the community, which I think will be really useful for you.
We accept.
That's very positive, jolly good. Mayor.
So following on from those comments about
Sorry, I'm sorry, slight distraction. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll wait.
The answer to that. So, I'm sorry, would you like to?
No, I was just going to say, following on the idea about making sure you're visible and publicity,
Yes.
you did kind of say you hadn't got a website up to scratch, so I just took the time to have a look at it. It's all right in some ways, but my point would be I had a look at it, I had to really look for any recognition of our involvement at the Combined Authority. I mean, within the funding streams, there is a comment that the grants that you're providing are through the Combined Authority. I think that's a mistake. I think it's a mistake partly from our behalf, so that we're not more insistent that the money that comes through these public channels devolve funds, and it's certainly true in terms of the way that we passport money through to even the constituent authorities. It doesn't always get acknowledged that it's come through a sort of strategic approach, be it around transport, be it around the environment. So my big request to yourself and as feedback is, can you make the fact that you're getting money from the Combined Authority a lot more obvious? And then second, for my colleagues and officers to make sure, I think you do make it part of sort of procurement and ongoing processes as we passport money over to organisations. And sorry, this is, I could name a whole other load of organisations that I don't think recognise in a public way the importance of how they're being funded by the Combined Authority. But that would just put that on as a matter of record. Please don't take it as too critical, but I don't think it's clear enough in your website, and you did self-acknowledge it.
I'm sure you can take that away.
Definitely take that on board, and certainly in the local nature recovery strategy, we have not just the kind of branding guidelines, but actually the logo is very much part of it. And we acknowledge on the fund, but I think you're right, we don't acknowledge our capacity funding, and we will definitely do that. Thank you.
So I think there's a piece of work for us to do as well to make sure that at least our logo appears, our branding appears on things. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I know you've said you contact with National Highways when they're doing construction work and your East West Railway. Do you contact with Network Rail, who are the largest landlord in the country. And they have natural corridors between two natural reserves, if you know what I mean. So if you could work with them and get them to come on board, and I'm sure they have environmental officers that would work with you.
Definitely we do. We could always do more. We were invited as part of the local nature recovery strategy to say where could strategic passovers of national infrastructure be for nature, and we put forward those in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And the local authority biodiversity group worked on where that would be fair and best across the combined authority. Thank you.
There's a lovely railway from York to Harrogate. I went like last time, and every one of these little stations is a garden. It's absolutely beautiful. Mayor, you ought to respond on that, and then I'm going to come to the council.
On a positive note, in response to your question, councillor, if you look at the ambitions of government in terms of further devolution, particularly around combined authorities taking on responsibilities around Network Rail. Now, some of that's about the possibility of using the stations as possibilities of engines for growth around development of housing and business opportunities and those co-location of travel opportunities. But absolutely going forward, I would argue that if you've been you're using your combined authorities devolved powers, you can talk about engaging with organisations like this and to deliver those nature corridors. So, you know, it's not too far away, hopefully, and the ambition for that is a good point, well made. But maybe with more powers and more funding, we're allowed to do exactly what you're describing. Oh, yeah.
And Councillor Khan, just a last word here.
One of the objectives of Natural Cambridgeshire has been to double the amount of nature in Cambridgeshire. I believe it's about 7% now. You wanted to make it up to 15%. I did a little calculation that works about the conversion from two semi-natural and natural landscapes of about 250 hectares a year, and that's never going to be achieved by biodiversity net gain. The amount of development in the area is just not sufficient. Most examples you've given are basically improving existing natural areas rather than conversion. How do you foresee? How do you foresee doing that conversion, getting that degree of change from unnatural to semi-natural environments?
So I think some of it will be biodiversity net gain, but I agree. We actually asked Martin Baker, one of our trustees, to do the calculation on whether he thought that that was possible. We were debating because we had originally said doubling nature by 2050, and then Adrian, as a kind of vehicle for the combined authority, said that's not really ambitious enough. It needs to be by 2040, and then we thought, can we really do it? So we did a calculation on what would be needed on the different habitats. I think it is that where we have less productive farmland, what are all those areas that could be used for nature, that could bring in that kind of funding, either at a landscape scale for moving things along corridors, for creating wetlands where perhaps a peat is just no longer able to be something that produces, and that alternative funding stream that comes in potentially from carbon credits in the future, but comes in from habitat restoration schemes, from countryside stewardship. So I think there are a number of different instruments. Also, we have a number of major environmental NGOs in our area that are expanding. The Great Fen, Wickham Fen Vision. So there is land being bought, and the Wildfire and Wetlands Trust, I mean, slightly over the border, but actually they're buying land in Cambridgeshire. So I think it's a combination of the ambition of individuals, you know, even Nattergal, which is kind of, you know, wilding estates just over the border. Actually, could they have ambitions in some of our land? So I don't think it would take that much to move us into that space. I mean, it's still only half of 30 by 30. It's half of 30 by 2030, but we are the breadbasket, and so we have to acknowledge that not every county can contribute 30%, because we are contributing in different ways to our local economy, our kind of national and economy.
But similar to that, there's an issue of, in that case, convincing farmers, and there's a basic conflict between farming production, which is basically you're trying to get the maximum production in the stage, and a natural environment tends to be less naturally less productive. It's either near a climax or subclimax. So it's a less productive stage in natural stage. There's a conflict there, and there's a conflict in the imagination of farmers. I formerly worked as an ecologist in local government, so I get some background of this. And this was a long time ago, but I was involved in, to give you an example, negotiating with the farmers who are flagged in South Wales on land owned by the Prince of Wales, well, now the King, at that time, who wanted to improve the wildlife on his farm. And when they had the group, the farmer to make proposals to improve the wildlife on their farm, the mentality was about production. It wasn't about improve. They couldn't get around the change of mentality towards an idea which you might have areas which you gave up production on, and so because it was going to be a cost to them. How do you get that through to farmers in this area?
Very briefly, because I'm aware you have quite a packed agenda. So I was at the Fenland Soil Conference yesterday.
Yeah.
Huge amount of farmers there, really wanting to say, how can we manage land for nature as well as land for production? And farmers from all, from the most productive areas, mainly, Fenland areas. I think it's changing. I think the mindset is really changing, and I think our job is to be alongside people, not telling them what to do, but saying these are things you could do. That's why we want the Sustainable Land Use Fund, so that we can actually support those farmers who are maybe on the edge, who may be thinking about it, by saying, look, this is the art of the possible. Do you want to go there? And I think many of them will. Some won't, but G's are going there. So the big landowners and producers are saying, actually, how can we keep our carbon? How can we keep our nature? So I really think the time is now.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Marvellous. Yes, the farmers aren't something like ahead of the game. So we're very, very grateful. We'd probably like to invite you back in 12 months' time to give us the latest update. Hopefully you'll have had plenty of money from us by then, and we'll have, spent it all to great effect. So we're very grateful to you coming. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right. So moving swiftly on. So I gave a lot of time to that because actually, there's quite a lot of money involved, and I think it's really important that we know what's going on. I'm going to we've got Emily Bolton now from the County Council coming to talk to us about. I'll just find the proper terms, and I do know what this is about because I've heard Emily talk before, and it was absolutely brilliant. So locally determined contributions, which I know we've talked about, but it's quite well, I thought it was a very complicated concept until I heard Emily speak, and it made it all, very intelligible. So thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Many thanks, Councillor. I'm Emily Bolton. I'm Climate Crisis Strategy Manager at Cambridge County Council. We are leading a piece of work that's actually very much a collaboration between ourselves and our other partners, who you can hopefully see at the bottom of the screen there. Next slide, please. So just to give you a very brief background, this is a grant-funded project from Innovate UK called Net Zero Living Programme. And the image up there just illustrates the sheer number of different authority areas that are involved in this fund. And what this is all about is exploring the non-technical barriers to delivery of net zero. So that is to say that, broadly speaking, we know how to do solar farms. We know how air source heat pumps work. What the challenge now is, how do we communicate the need? How do we engage residents? How do we overcome funding and governance barriers to making those things happen and actually implementable? And this particular project has also benefited from additional funding from the Combined Authority. So originally, Peterborough City Council were not a partner in the original fund, largely because they have also separately received Innovate UK funding for their Peterborough Accelerated Net Zero project. But because of the importance of this programme and covering the whole geographical area of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we felt it was important to enable them to proactively participate. So why are we doing this? What's the problem we want to fix? So there's a wealth of evidence out there that's actually suggesting that local government in general is in a slightly ambiguous position when it comes to its role in delivering net zero and climate action. We know it is important to do. There is increasing emphasis and focus on local, place-based, and indeed devolved and local government spearheaded delivery. But yet we don't have a framework to do that. We don't have a clear mechanism for joining up our action to what's going nationally and indeed internationally, or channeling back down the other way. There have been various suggestions on how to overcome this. One of the key ones was from a report from PwC and University of Leeds from a couple of years ago, which suggested a joined up, integrated national to local framework. And that is very much what we're trying to develop with a locally determined contribution. So this is an image that those of you who have heard about the project before will be familiar with. And it's really just illustrating this issue that we've got an international framework for net zero, setting out through the Paris Agreement what those overall targets are. We've got national level, nationally determined contributions. How are individual countries supporting that international picture? And then it sort of just stops at the moment. And what we're wanting to do is to develop that framework that works for us in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but also widely across other local authorities, to say, how do we establish what our contribution to that national picture is? But importantly, it's about both recognising what needs to happen from the carbon and evidence base, but also the ability and I suppose the uniqueness of the different places we're talking about, so that what you're then essentially starting to commit to and coalesce around in terms of targets are things that are actually representative of the capacities, capabilities and ambition of your local area, rather than that top-down, what potentially only national government or international governments think we should be doing. So without this framework, this is broadly the picture across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So great levels of ambition, lots of our local authorities all wanting to act in this space and to deliver, but all in slightly different ways. All of these targets, when you drill into the detail, are slightly different. So how can we actually coalesce around something singular? And what evidence tells us from previous projects is that actually having all of these different targets makes it feel a little bit of a moving feast for businesses, investors in particular, and also our communities. Whose targets are they aligning to and why? And will those targets change over time? Potentially, if we're talking about local government reform, will all of these get thrown up into the air and land differently? And so what the locally determined contribution tries to do is to produce a framework for how to develop these targets and report on them, and then to actually develop what those targets look like that will be based upon what is happening nationally. So we have that robust position to be starting from and building our local conversations from. Next slide, please. So there's a whole host of benefits that we think this approach can bring. Apologies for the slightly wordy slide. But first and foremost, I think we've got that collective ambition setting that I've just been alluding to. The ability to have that strategic alignment of ambitions, and also a structured approach for how to view climate in amongst all of the other policy decisions that are having to be made across our area. The local growth plan in particular is highlighted as a key challenge, because we need growth, but we also need to deliver low carbon. How can we look at those two things together in a way that they help each other rather than are seen as opposing positions? Then it's around demonstrating commitment and evidencing that progress. Because there aren't standardized ways of reporting net zero or reporting what we're doing, it's easy to become unstuck, be accused of greenwash, to have different people thinking, oh, why aren't you including this, that, or the other in your reports? And by having this strongly robust and justified and hopefully standardized approach, it will enable some of those discussions. You've got that improved collaboration and impact. I think at the moment, as alluded to with our targets, everyone is trying to do all of the things all at once. Can we get a bit more clever? Can we develop those economies of scale while working across our piece, so that we can start thinking about roles and responsibilities? Who's best placed to deliver different elements of this work? And so we can deliver that strategic impact more cohesively and more easily. Surfacing strategic interdependencies is another one that I think I just alluded to when you're thinking about how do climate ambitions intersect with other ambitions that we want to deliver. And finally, this piece about providing that market confidence in green investment, that actually the policy positions are clear and they are here to stay. And so they can then overcome those challenges that this arguably seen as a moving feast by those outside local government, feel that there are risk profiles that are affected by having different policy positions. So across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, this project has been happening in parallel with a wider programme being led by the Combined Authority to refresh the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Climate Action Plan. And so when we get to the tail end of the locally determined contributions project, the intention is to use this as a basis for developing a key new evidence base for the action plan refresh. And you can just see the wide range of evidence that is being pulled together to underpin the new action plan. And the key bit the locally determined contributions element will provide is those carbon reduction targets and pathways for how to deliver them. So what is the toolkit that we're creating? It covers these 6 segments, starting with thinking about actually what makes a good locally determined contribution, what makes it robust, what do we need to make sure is in there so that they are credible, through to then thinking more about the practicalities. How do we ensure it aligns with all of the governance? Many local authorities in this room, all with our own governance, we have to find a way to navigate all of this through our locally determined contribution. Through to those nuts and bolts, setting those carbon budgets and targets, working out what those pathways to reduction can and should look like. And on this piece, we are specifically working with the data group who are supporting the Climate Action Plan refresh to ensure we're all aligned and that our thinking is going into the Action Plan refresh and vice versa. Then picking up co-benefits. You've already heard about Natural Cambridgeshire and the importance of nature today. Well, actually, we need to ensure that in decarbonising, we're also supporting nature at the same time. And how do we recognise those benefits? How do we recognise that climate risk and adaptation also needs to be acknowledged as we move forward? And then finally, a little slice thinking about investment. So how can we actually functionally use our locally determined contribution to provide that investment or encourage that investment into our place? So this is part of a programme that started back in February, and we're about halfway through now. And we've gone through an iterative process of co-design with a range of workshops because we feel it's, while we've obviously got that technical element to the project, it's also important to gain that flavour of what is Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and what do we want to do with our locally determined contribution. We're also playing the guinea pigs to that academic side of working out how to do a locally determined contribution. So we're just in the process of kicking off a second round of workshops. And the one highlighted there is next Monday. I believe all of this committee should have had an invitation to that one. If you haven't, let me know and I'll make sure you receive one. And that is very much trying to delve in and really understand once again, is our thinking on track? Where we think a locally determined contribution needs to look like and deliver, is it starting to do that? And what might need to change? And then as we go through this process, it'll be iterating those deliverables and working with colleagues focusing on the Climate Action Plan to actually develop and implement a locally determined contribution framework into actually what our targets and pathways look like for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And the intention is to have final versions by the end of our funding regime currently from the end of June of this year. I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions.
Very much indeed. Thank you. And you speak very well. That was very clear. Thank you. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor du Preez.
Thank you. Obviously, today's announcement from the Chancellor is a rehash of lots of announcements we've heard before, but it significantly moves the goalposts around growth and development in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. You're talking about finishing by June, but presumably you're kicking a football towards the goalposts that are moving around very significantly. And sorry, it's a rather unfair question, but I wonder how you continue to progress this really important work in the light of that scenario.
I think if I can make it more general, because it's not fair to ask you to comment on things that are political, really. So, what we face in this part of the country is a constantly changing landscape economically, really, and it's about how responsive can you be to changes and announcements, which will happen, actually probably happen everywhere. So, is your timeline jeopardized by stuff that might happen, announcements, be it from the mayor or be it from government or whatever, or are you kind of on track irrespective of that?
So in terms of that timeline, that is largely down to the fact it's a grant-funded programme and the funding stops at the end of June. So in terms of that kind of overarching picture, that's where we are. But one of the things we're very cognizant on in this project is that the moving feast of political positions and strategies that are coming forward from all the different levels of government. And so one of the key things we're trying to do when we're developing our framework is make it responsive to those things. So providing, rather than stating, for example, you should do X, Y, Z, that are perhaps then incumbent on a policy position not changing. Instead, it puts parameters around how you should deal with a policy change, how you should approach that issue through the lens of climate to make sure you still retain that alignment. In the background of all of this, we have some other significant work going on in that we're anticipating a new nationally determined contribution coming through imminently. And we have been engaging quite closely with Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and have had some conversations with the UK Committee on Climate Change as well, because what they're trying to do simultaneous to us is understand how do you reflect local in the nationally determined contribution. So we're trying to make sure A is speaking to B and vice versa.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I was very interested to see your slide that has the timeline with all the different local authorities and some of their different goals. We've attempted to collaborate something like that before, but it's a really hard one because they all mean different things. To me, it's not just differences in approach, it's also differences in political priorities. And so I'm curious, if we get to the end of your project and you've arrived at a scheme and it's not politically palatable to all of the constituent authorities, whatever shape or size they are, is there a fallback plan? What do we do at that point? Does it have to be ratified by everyone? What happens next?
This speaks to some of the wider governance that is going on, and the intention is that the locally determined contribution outputs would go through the CPCA's governance as it stands in relation to the Climate Change Action Plan. In terms of managing different expectations around what that needs to look like, I think that is in part why we're having sessions like this and why we're trying to engage all partners throughout this whole programme, so that we can ensure that the needs and requirements of different places are able to be managed as we develop. But I think in terms of the nitty-gritty, I don't know whether Judith or Adrian have something to add.
Thank you. And yes, clearly, I think building upon what Emily has said this morning, which I think is firstly, I think you presented it brilliantly well. In fact, thank you for articulating it so clearly. I think one of the things that comes across is that we are developing a methodology which will provide us with data so that we can analyse. And the strengths of this has been the engagement and workshops that have been put in place to allow people to understand the process. Now, as we all appreciate, understanding the process may be difficult, may be different to then accepting what it's telling us and then agreeing a set of actions that flow out of it. But it is really important, place to start is agreeing the methodology as how do we get to the data and then thinking about what we do with the data. So one of the things that we've been doing as officers is ensuring that the place directors group is cited on this work and is part of this work. And the place directors group, just so that this committee is aware, is a group of representatives from each of our constituent authorities who have an economic growth and sustainability place role in their job title within each of the constituent authorities. And what we're trying to do is work across as the system. So every constituent authority has a voice, and we look at different issues to try and avoid duplicating. So I'm not doing the same thing as another place director in another part of our space, but we're working to reduce duplication and understand the issues from different perspectives at that level. And that group is really important in terms of thinking about it, and also the governance for the looking beyond officers into members, then that's really important. So coming to this group is a really important stage as the Environment Sustainable Communities Committee, but also thinking how the governance works more widely on climate and how this agenda needs to go through updates and information and for discussion at committees more widely through our constituent authorities. So I think we're very much at the stage at the moment of developing data, developing methodologies. I'm sure there's much we can improve, but there's a focus on how we need to take through what the governance needs to look like for the Climate Change Action Plan, and in particular, if we can develop shared climate objectives across the wider area and what the governance needs to look like for that. So that's very much a priority. This is the early stages of the work, and we need to look at doing that in order to take this through our governance processes successfully. So we're not at this stage looking at how what we would do if it couldn't be agreed. We're more looking at how do we engage and consider the governance to enable what can be agreed commonly so that we can work together on that is moved forward. I hope that's useful, but it's obviously very much part of an ongoing discussion that we will need to have around this table.
It seems to me there are so many political variables going on in what will affect Emily's project that perhaps at our next meeting, when we have a budget and finance report, we might think about whether there is any other further funding that we can give to this project. So I think it's so important. I'm not sure a deadline because of a finance deadline is the wisest option rather than a deadline of getting the best result that we need for ourselves.
Just come back on that specifically. We have within the Climate Change Action Plan agreements by the Investment Committee got some leeway in terms of how we use the budget to advance the Climate Change Action Plan. So there are a number, without going into the details, there's a number of elements that were agreed. We have agreed a particular contribution to locally determined contributions as well as money for other areas, and we do have some flexibility to use that.
Good. And I'm hopeful that this work with the focus on the local does mean that we'll get to the position of buy-in from all our constituent members, because, you know, hopefully nobody feels stuff is being done to them. So I have high hopes for this. Mayor.
So that sounded vaguely positive from Judith there about you're not quite out of a job yet, so that's good. Look, well done on the work. Very important part of the work, you know, as part of a bigger picture with regard to the combined authorities' response to the Independent Climate Commission. I kind of go back to another point which I mentioned previously. Again, can we have those slides? They're not already been, you know. Okay. It's about that sort of collaboration, working together. $1 million question. It did make me smile as I heard you talking. I thought, I'm sure you said mission, and I hear mission-led government a lot at the moment. So that's good. The word speaks there. And there is that thing about the idea of mission-led central government is about working cross departments in the same way that the mission-led we should work across our authorities. But why just stop again with our constituent members of our combined authority? Again, I asked the question about, in terms of the engagement, my apologies, I can't be there at the meeting, I got the invitation, but have we got representation from police and crime? Have we got representation from fire? Have we got representation from the Integrated Care Board? Have we got, they would be three statutory bodies that, I think have a role to play. If you look at the kind of, particularly about, where the NHS and the movement of patients and people going along to appointments, again, all of those with regard on the Integrated Care Partnership, and to some extent, they're also on our board. It's the direction to travel, as I said, I've said again, and I'll keep saying it because I'm proud to be the mayor of the combined authority. But the missions that we talk about will come from breaking down those barriers. So my question is how much engagement in terms of the work that you're doing have you also had from other statutory bodies and important potential contributors to this issue elsewhere?
Thank you, Emily.
Certainly, all of those bodies you've mentioned have been engaged through this process. I think there's the usual challenge of you can invite people to something, but whether they're able to attend just because of diaries, etc., is always tricky. But we have been trying to maintain and build those collaborations as part of this programme to ensure that even if anyone is unable to actively participate in our planned exercises, that they can still, at the minimum, have the awareness of what we're doing here and trying to achieve, and be provided that opportunity to input. Several of those parties are also on the officer level CPCA climate programme board, and that's another avenue through which we are engaging those wider organisations.
Yeah.
Point, which is a kind of narrative around the white paper, because obviously in the white paper before Christmas there was talk, for instance, of as we have to deal with local government reform, which I'll not go into, but there is ideas of working alongside integrated care boards. I'm an absolute advocate. I passionately believe that public health should be within the combined authority. I passionately believe that the Police and Crime Commissioner role should be within a combined authority, and that's something that see is exemplified elsewhere around the country. I think the direction of travel is going. What I want to say is the work you embed now, and it looks like we're not going to just cut you off just like that, I think will be important, because that mission-led local approach that you're giving now, I think will be very important for us going forward as a combined authority, working with whatever constituent authorities we are in the future.
So, Emily, thank you very, very much indeed. We'd look, perhaps when you have finished, perhaps you'd like to come back and present your actual completed piece of work to us, and we'd be very grateful for that. Thank you so much. Right, moving on, we're on director's highlights now, so it's back to Judith.
Thank you, Chair. I will just do a brief introduction and then in the usual way take questions. So there's a number of different issues spreading across, I think, the full remit of the Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee. So you'll note that today the Strategic Place Partnership with Homes England is due to be signed, and that has a number of dimensions to it. And for anybody that was interested in looking at the details, the board approved that to go forward at the November 2024 board, and the draft version, which was only slightly tweaked, is in the board papers for November. Broadly, what that seeks to do is to set up a board chaired by the mayor, which allows us to work closely with Homes England and to, in effect, have a joint governance on their work collaboratively with the combined authority and our constituent authorities in this area, to look at both housing more generally and, of course, affordable housing specifically. So it has elements about governance. It has elements about driving forward to agree a 5-year delivery plan, again, with clear strategic objectives that would be jointly agreed, and then a 1-year business plan, which we would obviously have as the first year of a 5-year plan, with a particular focus on looking at how we can work together to ensure best effect of the revenue funding that Homes England have to allow particular sites to have master planning or feasibility work done that can potentially unblock housing sites that otherwise aren't coming forward. So that agreement is due to be signed today, after or even during this meeting, depending on timing. And then work will then need to progress to actually look at and bring forward to this committee what the proposals are about a plan. As I say, both the 5-year and the 1-year plan, and criteria for potentially working together to award that revenue funding. But it's at high level at the moment and a lot of details need to be worked out. But I'm working closely with ASMA on that work. You'll then see, and everybody's very aware of the various items that relate to this committee that are within the English Devolution White Paper. Obviously, it goes without saying that the system change that's suggested by Local Government Review, I'm not going to talk about here, but what we can say is there's some really interesting opportunities about working with Great British Energy, and Maxine, who you met at the last committee, obviously leads the South East Hub. She is in particular attending a number of meetings with Great British Energy with a view to thinking how we can bring relationships with them to bear. Obviously, we've touched on health and well-being, and in particular proposals around mayoral involvement, greater mayoral involvement with the integrated care partnerships, who are obviously already represented on our board. And a key area is strategic spatial planning, which again is at early days. Clearly, there's no, the white paper is not yet progressing through Parliament, and therefore there's a lot of work still to be done, but we're aware that that is the direction of travel, and hopefully the infrastructure delivery framework that was looked at this committee last year is a helpful first step, but clearly much work to be considered there alongside the constituent authorities' local plans. We've got a brief update on the nature recovery strategy, although in fact the key steering group meeting that I'm sure Pamela will be chairing tomorrow is due tomorrow, with a particular focus on the mapping, and then in particular starting to look at the implementation in February. So at your February meeting, which I think is scheduled for the 26th, there will be a full update there. There's ongoing work, as I've indicated in the paper, which Maxine is leading on to ensure that we are advancing conversations with the Department of Energy Security. And she was able to give an update to the board with Councillor Smith about the work of the hub. And you can see there the progress they've in particular made with the community fund since we last met. So obviously the next meeting will be the last meeting before the mayoral pre-election period, but we've already got 2 presentations planned, and in between while we will have 2 workshops sessions, one to review the Opportunity Fund, which Jim and Ade have the discussion about ability within the local growth plan. And I know both of those sessions are important and getting into diaries, which we can also reflect on in committee on the 26th. In the background, obviously, we've got a paper on the programme later. And the breadth, and Adrian and Jim will present on that. But I think certainly what I want to reflect on is, although we've picked up these issues here, and there is a lot of work going on, but certainly we're working very hard with colleagues in legal, procurement and finance to make sure that there's really strong progress being made on speeding up grant funding agreements, payments being made, claims being made, and so on, as well as making sure projects go through the investment panel and the investment committee. And please do let us know if there's any delays, because certainly one of my focuses is to improve those processes so there's not delays and that we're more timely with some of those processes. So I hope that's useful, and over to you, Chair, for an update, for any questions, sorry.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
In the section on the white paper, devolution white paper, you talked about clean energy. I know that in the past, the Combined Authority has been approached by groups like the Waterside Green Energy hydropower project in St. Neots that is now folded because they were unable to find enough capital funding to proceed. With this new mission and new way of working with government, would we be in a better place to be able to support with capital community energy projects like that?
I think it's too early to say on the exact scope of that relationship, but I'm pleased. That's why I'm pleased that Maxine is engaging in detail with Great British Energy. Although she is reporting to me that we're still some way from the detail, and I think we need to understand the funding, the opportunities, and the nature of their work. But we'll continue to bring updates on that, and if there are any opportunities, that's why I'm keen that Maxine is there so that we're cited on that and can bring those here.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. Yeah, on the clean energy again, it's on the clean energy point 2.2. Just to let everyone know, you're probably aware that Peterborough is part of the heat network zoning pilot project with our PIRI project. And draft heat network zones have been created for Peterborough. I just wondered if, you know, if the combined authority would appreciate updates from Peterborough, from our constituency authority, about how that's going. So there is a really large, you know, project with a substantial amount of private investment being drawn up in Peterborough, and it has been over the last number of years actually. So I just wanted to let committee know that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the answer is yes. So we'll be in contact about that. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, thank you. A very quick, another quick one.
Quick. 2.1, working in partnership with Homes England. In previous meetings, this committee has talked about the winding up of our housing scheme. Is this different? Is it something new, or is it a change in policy?
Can I just intervene on that? So I gave evidence at a select committee yesterday on local government reorganisation, and the Mayor of Yorkshire was there. She said quite clearly, and I haven't asked our own mayor about this, she said quite clearly that as the Mayor of Yorkshire, she has her eye on Homes England to subsume the responsibilities and the budgets of Homes England into the Yorkshire Mayoral Strategic Authority. So I think this is part of a bigger plan, but that is a political answer. And I think, yes, I'm not sure I don't want to draw Judith into that. I think that's a conversation we probably need to be. I mean, do you want to comment, Mayor?
Civic comment, obviously. I welcome the fact that within half an hour, actually, we'll be sitting with Homes England and talking about a memorandum understanding, which we agreed at board about how we're going to work forward. And anything I do as a mayor for this area will be in collaboration with all other constituent authorities.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Judith.
So the affordable housing programme, obviously, which is on the agenda, and ASMA is working to conclude that in the terms that was originally agreed. So that is a separate affordable housing programme, which we had certain specific funding for and are, you know, continuing to monitor and evaluate, and will close down when the last units are done. This is an opportunity. It's a very high level memorandum of understanding, which, as I say, covers some of the areas that I set out around governance and planning. At this stage, it's very high level. The commitment that we have is to work with them and to bring forward some proposals that could then come through this committee and indeed through the project board. But we haven't gone any further with the details, but obviously it needs to fit as part of the governance for this authority.
Yeah, and obviously the board will be the people discussing that. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much. Clearly, there is a reluctance to open the Pandora's box in this meeting of local government reorganisation.
It wouldn't be appropriate in this committee.
But I'm just wondering about the item on strategic planning here and the timetable and the process for taking on that responsibility, while for some time there will be understandably some state of flux, bearing in mind that these are at various stages of developing their local plans and all the tectonic plates are shifting.
I think the answer is we probably don't know enough detail yet.
Beautifully said, Chair. Yes, that's a piece of work we clearly need to commence, and it's at very early stages, and very much My focus for the last few weeks has been on bus reform rather than on strategic planning. So there will be further discussions, clearly.
There is a load of stuff coming down the track. Okay, thank you. And Councillor Khan, briefly, please.
It's interesting, Councillor Day.
So can you, through the chair, thank you.
Talking about heat zoning, in Europe, particularly in Germany, where they have Stadtwerke, local authority energy companies, in some towns they zone different areas of the city for different types of heat support. The problem has always been in the past that there are legal problems. I just wondered whether the legal problems have been resolved, or are you only looking at new development? What are the opportunities? Do you know anything about the opportunities for this type of technique in Britain and what the legal constraints are?
So I know that Cambridge City, along with the university, have been looking into this. I think we probably don't have that information at our fingertips at the moment, but hopefully, if we go and do some work with Peterborough, that will answer some of those questions, and we'll bring it back. Okay. Right, in which case, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Judith for that. And Asma, who's been patiently sitting there now to give us the latest on the never-ending affordable housing programme, so it seems. Been talking about this for 7 years. Thank you, Asma.
Sorry, no, it will end, believe you me. Thank you very much. Councillor. Right, I'll just give a brief update of where we are. We've had 1,066 new homes completed. There's 380, vast majority of them are at Northminster and as Wisbech Road March. As we are sitting here today, I've been informed that Stanground, which is one of the projects that's coming through, will complete and hand over this coming month, February. Northminster also has been alerted to me that that will sort of come in 2 phases as well next month. So that's good news on those. The paper also mentions British Sugar Way, which is now complete and the grant has been paid. So that's been successful as well. Wisbech Road March, we've had 16 now on verbal update here of shared ownership homes at the entrance of the site. These are all shared ownerships. They've all been occupied just before Christmas. So that's a well boost for the numbers in the housing completions. And just to let you know, Halo's had a couple of completions, final ones at Roman Fields, and a couple that they've managed to sort of put towards us as part of a final tranche, which I'll bring later on. There's no more to update at the moment. Everything's sort of going according to plan. It's just weather has been a bit of a problem.
The weather's been horrid, hasn't it? Thank you very much indeed. And it's nice to hear that at Wisbech Road March, people got into their new homes just before Christmas, which must have been a good Christmas present. Mayor, you want to comment?
Point at the end, it's financial implications, and all grant funding are allocated with the exception of 231,000 arising from clawback and underspend. Is that just being held in a kind of
the next item? Yes, we're going to, don't worry, nothing's being held back, it's all being spent. So Asma has a cunning plan. Do you want to comment, Asma? On...
Yeah, no, that will be coming in. I am intending to spend all the money. I do not want to give any back to MHCLG. Yeah. My final pausement in life was to get all the money spent that we had come to CPCA.
Which was 60% of what we should have had.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey ho. Right. Thank you. So it's a very, very clear paper. If there aren't any other questions, we'll thank Asma for, her diligence and robustness and sticking with this, because I know it's been really tough at times. And I think she's probably spent some windy, miserable days, on building sites. So
that too.
we are very grateful. So many, many thanks. But moving on to the use of the grant for Halo units. Do you want to just introduce this, Asma? Thank you.
Yes, please. Right, we had a final bit of funding left over from Stanground and the garage sites. Half of it went to Stanground, half of it was remaining. So I approached Halo, which were able to provide us with on the off-the-shelf accommodation with the remaining grant. They provide us with 7 units. Again, I made sure these units were in Peterborough because the garage sites were in Peterborough. They have provided us with 7 units. They are listed there: Fletton Folly, Haddon Peaks, and Hampton Waters. The last 2 are in construction. I've been on site there anyway. We are going to be using 230,000 of the grant to acquire these 7 units. I'm just asking whether this could be approved today.
Thank you very much. And actually, the average grant is quite low at
Yes, it's-
32, just under 33,000 per house. So that's quite a small percentage, isn't it,
Yes.
compared to what we've done in the past. Any questions, or are we happy just to say yes and thank you? Okay, right. So, okay, yes. So I will propose that. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Todd Jones. Thank you. Okay, and are we all in agreement, please? Right, one abstention, please, from Councillor Tierney, and an approval from everybody else. So thank you. Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Asma, as always. Right, moving swiftly on to item 11, which is the climate programme delivery, and it's going to be over to Adrian. Oh, we've got James. Oh, hello, James, on screen. Thank you very much. We'll start with Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, you've got a paper in front of you which covers 3 aspects of the climate programme. So first of all, I'll pick up on the progress on the Climate Action Plan review. Then we have the programme itself, and finally we've got an update on where we are with the Opportunity Fund. And I'm joined by Jim online, who's been particularly leading on the Opportunity Fund, but we're working together on the climate programme to bring forward that delivery. I think I can probably quickly deal with the Climate Action Plan review element, because we've already touched on that debate this morning around some of the challenges of when exactly to take that forward, with the need to take on board the emerging evidence that we're going to get from the locally determined contributions toolkit, and the local growth plan work and other emerging government policy. So what we've done is taken the direction from this committee, which was very much about making sure we aligned any of the evidence base with the work that we're doing on growth issues, so that we are looking to make sure we only commission single bits of evidence rather than do it duplication. So that's going on in terms of the development of the evidence base. But as we've noted there, that effectively means we're going to be moving the spend into the bulk of the spend into next year as we take that forward. But we are in making sure that that evidence is flexible in terms of its usage, so that we can use it for whatever purpose that we need responding to. We are still awaiting the local growth plan remit letter that's referred to in the report, which will set out the sort of terms of engagement around the local growth planning process. So I'm afraid that's still a watch this space, and we'll update in the next meeting, assuming that we've had that information from government. Moving on to the programme itself. So just to, we've included progress figures in there, but at your next meeting, as well as the normal budget report, we are bringing you an enhanced finance report, which will cover the detailed take-up and some of the actions that were in the action log around reporting on spend. So the next meeting will have that in detail, but I think you can see there's been very good progress across the climate programme in terms of committing funding. And since your last meeting, 2 new projects finished their journey through our assurance. And so we have approved, as a combined authority, the peat affected soils road trial which is going to be really important in terms of looking at both responding to the adaptation to the increased damage that we're likely to face in terms of the ground subsidence, but also the existing problems that we have. And also support for the digital program, which again is a very important part of providing different routes to dealing with climate challenges. We have RAG rated the projects in there. As I said, you'll get more detail in terms of financial performance next time. Just to briefly pick up on the amber ones in terms of those underway. So we've already mentioned the local nature recovery strategy, and that's amber because we do have our technical steering group tomorrow, and so it's really crucial to see what position we're at. And so we're keeping it at amber because of past delays on the programme. The evidence base I've covered, and in terms of biodiversity support to councils, that's amber because we've had that launched in terms of one of our authorities. The others, we've been negotiating the exact terms of the grant and how they would deploy it. We're making good progress on that, but because we haven't yet agreed with all our authorities, we've kept it as amber, but we're very confident that we will be in that position very, very shortly. That's the biodiversity audits additional funding. It's not to the Hunts biodiversity programme. It's two separate projects, just to be clear. And then finally, we have the Opportunity Fund, and I'll hand over to Jim just to bring it up to speed. Obviously, there is the informal meeting plan.
Thanks, Adrian. And good morning, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. What I would like to say just at the outset is the audio is dipping in and out when you're on screen. I think it's easier to hear when people are speaking to the microphone, but when they're not, it's not coming across very well. On the Opportunity Fund, in the report, it's the kind of last paragraph of my summing up that's the critical one. We've received 29 applications at the close of play on the 31st of January. On the 17th of January, sorry. Those applications are now with the independent assessors who are scoring and ranking those applications. We anticipate receiving a full report from the independent consultants on Friday of this week, and that will form the basis of the report that we take through our initial governance, which includes the informal meeting of the ESC next Friday, and thereafter the internal investment panel in February, and then we go. The critical date then after that is the 12th of March, when the 10th, as we move to the 10th of March, the 10th of March investment committee, when we will be bringing the projects for a formal approval. So critical date should be early afternoon on Friday in terms of me getting the applications back, the scored applications back. And as I said, that will form the basis for the discussion a week on Friday, and thereafter at the investment panel.
Can I start some clarification there? So the decision on where the grants are going rests purely with the investment committee. This committee doesn't have any role in those decisions. Judith?
The decision to, the single assurance framework set out that the decision making for that funding goes through investment committee and then onto the board. However, what we have arranged is you have the opportunity prior to us presenting either to the investment panel, which is the officer group, or the investment committee, which is the member group chaired by the mayor, that you will be able to look and receive those information and therefore influence that before it goes through that process. We can also bring a report back through we could give a written report after that process, and obviously you, Chair, will have sight of that through the board process as well. But yes, you're correct in your assessment.
Okay, so I think, so I'm looking at colleagues here. I would be deeply disappointed if this committee didn't have some input into these grants, quite honestly, because, you know, we kind of, you know, we set these things up and then just to kind of hand it on to somebody else, I think is a mistake. And I understand, you know, governance, you know, it's probably just the way it has to be. But I think we need to have pre-sight of these schemes before it goes to the investment committee, and then I think we need to be making recommendations to the investment committee to ensure that what is being funded are schemes that you know, reflect our priorities. Otherwise, I think we won't be doing, you know, you kind of wonder what's the point of us if we don't have the opportunity to do that. I mean, are you in agreement with that? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I have expressed my discontent on this topic in previous meetings and the way we've ended up with this process. But so if we have our informal meeting where we will draw up some opinions that will be shared with the investment committee when they review them, I think that's the best case scenario we have in front of us now. But I agree with you that the investment committee may be well placed to determine whether something is investable or not, but that it's our input that's really required to determine whether it manages the environmental aspirations of the combined authority.
Quite agree. Thank you very much indeed. So that's, yes, please.
Thank you. And I just wanted to respond in two things. So I think it's really important that obviously you set the framework for this funding, and it's within that framework that the investment committee must make its decisions. I think if I can take away an action, Chair, to look into two things. One, whether we set up not only a pre-investment panel workshop, but also a pre-investment committee workshop so that you're cited on all of that. That's one option. Or indeed, there are obviously options through the chair that we consider you being part of the team to present the information to investment committee on the 10th of March. So if we can take away that for discussion, and we'll come back to you.
Just to respond in advance, my heart sinks when you say the word workshop, knowing that, you know, yesterday, I spent the whole of yesterday triple booked. Actually, I've spent the whole of this week triple booked. It's just, you know, logistically, it's just, you know, local government reorganisation actually has, you know, played havoc with all of our workload. So I think we need to have something that's, you know, the combined authority is already extremely greedy of our time. And so I think we need to be very mindful that, you know, we'll have to have something that works for all of us, because there's no point in going to a lot of trouble to set up workshops and then find that, you know, key people can't be there because they're sitting with ministers or whatever.
Alternative then, what we can do is we've got the informal workshop set up for Friday the 7th, so a week on Friday. I think we can undertake to make sure that there is a formal note of that meeting at which perhaps, Chair, if you're able to attend, we can conclude at the end of that meeting that that is the formal note. That can be included in the investment panel and the investment committee papers. And if there's any feedback on that, we can undertake to bring that to you through an email process in between the panel and the committee. And we could operate in that way to provide you with that oversight. And then obviously note that you will be at the board on the 19th of March. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
At the investment panel meeting. Yes, I think if one of us is there to help to present the findings that we would like them to consider. Yes, although we're not the decision maker.
No,
Yeah.
no, appreciate that. But, okay, so can I just ask Jim one more question, please? So Jim, you said 29 applications. By how much, if all of those were to get all the money they'd asked, by how much does that exceed the actual pot that's available, please?
The total ask in the 29 applications is just in excess of £3 million.
And the pot is what, 1 million? Okay, so
Yes.
that's Okay, so, all right. So are you having conversations about giving people part of what they're asking for rather than nothing? I mean, how's this going to work, please?
I might come in here then, and obviously Judith can come in as, in follow-up. I think from the perspective of the independent assessors of the projects, they will present us with a scored list of 1 to 29. And, you know, if you're looking at it from a purist perspective, you would then say that you would draw the cut in that list of 29 projects when you hit £1 million based on the existing asks. That, you know, as we move forward, and perhaps for a more in-depth discussion when we get together next Friday, you know, you might want to take a view on the individual allocations, but you know, from my perspective at the moment, we've got to go with what's in the application from the constituent council, or from the parish council, or from the other body that's doing the applying. We might, you know, it could be problematic if we said to people, we'll give you less money, if that meant that the project failed. But the other aspect to this as well is that it's important that we don't lose sight that there are more projects on the list than we're likely to be capable of funding. So if for any reason the initial approved projects fail, we need to be able to bring forward the projects that are on our reserve list to make sure that they're given the chance to take their project forward. And the reasons that a project might fail is that they may not be able to deliver the match funding that they said they were going to deliver. So that will be tested, you know, post the assessment process.
Of course, and deliverability is a major factor in
Yes.
approving grants. Councillor Davenport-Ray. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I bring Judith in first? Sorry.
Thank you. So yes, absolutely. To confirm your last point, Chair, there's three key parts of the assessment: whether it does what you wanted it to do, the strategic fit, whether it offers value for money, and whether it's deliverable. So those absolutely are key to the assessment. I would just sort of say that at the moment we haven't received this report. So as officers, we haven't scrutinised it. And one of the things that Jim, Adrian and I have been talking about is the need for us to moderate and understand. We want to understand the geographical spread. We want to understand the size and scale, because there might be some, for instance, you encouraged collaborative bids to come in, which are likely to be larger. We need to look at all of those things as a whole before we bring it to you. So we need to, in essence, check and challenge and moderate the findings. And I think that's important that we do that assessment. There's two other things I wanted to mention. One, that in your criteria, you asked for that minimum 10% match. I think if we start to go back and give them less money, that's likely to be problematic, and actually in terms of decision making, likely to mean it goes into later in the so I probably wouldn't encourage that. The other thing I did want to say, which is about the budget. So we do have more capital within the budget. We said 1 million because we didn't want to go through a process that we then weren't able, you know, it almost became too big and unmanageable. We can review that. If we think there's for instance, if the conclusion of committees is that we have more capital and we have really worthy projects that you support, we could do that. Alternatively, we could have a second round in which the best ones go forward. So we will absolutely continue to work to maximise the impact of the funding that's available, and ensuring that the criteria that you set are first and centre of the process.
Thank you very much. And actually, you know, looking at this table here, I think we're making our money go a long way, actually. So thank you for that. Right, I'm sorry, I've monopolised that. Any questions from anybody else? Councillor Davenport-Ray, then Councillor Dupre.
Jim mentions the concept of a reserve list, and I think that's really important, because even if we want to repeat the scheme, I wouldn't want these applicants to have to go through all of this again. And so whether we're talking about funding in the current year that we might have available, or funding in next year's budget, I hope we can keep all of this information, all the hard work that the applicants have already done.
That.
Councillor Dupre.
I was wanting to move on to another item in the report altogether, so if anybody wants to. Yeah, okay. I was just wanting to ask on the Future Fens, the water work stream, on page, I think 37, which says that the concept is being re-evaluated with Future Fens integrated adaptation partners. I was wondering what reevaluated meant, please.
Adrian, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we had an initial agreement through the committee before the SAF process for a support to the work of Future Fens integrated adaptation, of which we're one of the sponsor bodies. What we've now asked is for a more detailed description of what they are going to do with our money, so that we can judge value for money from that. So we're still very positive about the partnership, but it's actually being able to describe for our new process effectively what we're getting for our money. And so we're just in talks with the Future Fens steering group around what they see as priorities and what would align with Combined Authority's priorities. So it's that form of reevaluation. Okay.
In section 3.1, you describe the relationship between the climate action plan and the local growth plan, which is coming. And there's some wording that I find a bit troubling. So in the first paragraph, the LGP and specific investment proposals need to respond to climate and nature issues. I completely agree with that. But to continue on, that similarly, the action plan needs to understand and respond to growth ambitions. I'm afraid that's not the way that climate and nature and environment work. It's a one-way conversation. Growth affects environment. So I'm looking forward to our informal session on this topic, because I think it's really important that we're careful about our wording and rather than commissioning more data and thinking about it this way, as the chair mentioned earlier, there's already lots of data sets out there that we can base this work on, some of them commissioned by ourselves. And so it's important that we make reference to them, but it is a one-way dialogue.
The group plan should be responding to the climate, not the other way around. Councillor Cornwall.
Yeah, I just have to say I don't agree with that at all. I think that the original wording is very sensible, very realistic, and I really hope we do remain in that reasonable way of approaching it. Thank you.
We will find a way of wording it that works for everybody, hopefully. Thank you very much. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we're asked to note the contents of this, and we thank James and Adrian for all their work on this, and Judith, who I'm sure has had massive input as well. So ahead of schedule. Nice. Just moving on to the work program, which looks pretty intensive. Is there any questions about anything that's in the work program? No? Okay. So at which point I shall say we've come to the end of the meeting. Our next meeting is on the work program, the 26th of February, but that will come around very quickly. Thank you very, very much, all of you, for attending in person and on screen. And yeah, have a good day. Thank you very much to all our officers.